okay? Our topic is whether Orthodox Jews can be, an Orthodox Jew can be a progressive, a political progressive. That's our question. And I think it's a good topic. It's because I thought of it. So it's right. That's what makes it good. And I think it is somewhat interesting in that sense. But I think it's interesting because generally I think most people feel that Orthodox Jews are not progressives, and you definitely see that in the last couple of elections, right? In the last couple of elections, you see that Orthodox Jewry has voted definitely more towards conservative Republican side, and even, by the way, even when it comes to Jews that are voting Democrat, for the most part, they don't call themselves progressives if they're Orthodox Jews that are voting Democrat. There are Orthodox Jews that vote Democrat.
So there were everybody that was commenting on Facebook posted this. It was pretty uniform, and then everyone's like, "Hey man, you got two terms that you need to define."
Yeah, I hate that.
To have this discussion. No, but they're right.
I know.
You can have that discussion. That's why they don't want to. So the two terms obviously that have to be articulated clearly within limitations, within parameters, whatever parameters we're going to agree upon. Those two words are, of course, Orthodox Judaism and progressivism, I should say. Right? Just progressivism. So
yeah.
Progressivism, how would you? Political progressivism. Okay, so I said that I would take the one if you would take the other. So you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Please, you go first. Just in terms of the order of the question, you asked if you could do Orthodox Jews. So go ahead.
So again, the question is, can Orthodox Jews be progressive? And as we said, we have to frame this by defining Orthodox Judaism and defining what progressive means. So Orthodox Judaism, very, very simply, means belief that God gave the Torah as is, and that it is immutable, meaning it cannot be changed. That is it. We believe that God gave the Torah, not that it was inspired by God, not that it was divinely thought of or done by very, very wise people over a long period of time, not that it was redacted, not that some of it was given by God and other pieces changed, not that the whole thing, the entirety was given by God and he said you're allowed to change it, but rather that it was given by God and that it cannot change. And just one added statement for clarity purposes. This has nothing whatsoever to do with observance. So whether you keep 4 Shabbats every month or whether you keep 0, it doesn't make a difference in terms of what you believe. There's your belief, and then there's your observance, and those are along 2 different scales. One is faith, and the other is action. That's how I would define Orthodox Judaism. What say you?
Okay, I'll take that. So I'll tell you, I initially object to the defining of terms, although normally I know that it's necessary, because I like the idea of people, when they answer their questions, of coming in with their own terms. I think that's part of the beauty of the question. So that's why on the original Facebook post that I did, I wanted people to be able to say, well, I define orthodoxy this way, and I define progressivism this way, and therefore...
I'm willing to fight over my definition.
What?
I'm willing to fight over my definition.
No, I don't want to fight over, because then that's another topic. That's a great topic that we could have, is what's the definition of Orthodox Judaism? And I have a feeling as soon as I give my definition of political progressivism, we could probably also have a whole discussion about whether that's true as well. Right, but I'm going to do something different. Right, I'm going to do something different. By the way, I think, Rabbi Sprung, I think that what you should do is unmute your Zoom.
Does it make an echo?
I will find out in about a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes an echo.
Well, I don't have mine muted. It's not making an echo, so it should be fine.
Cool.
But
No, you're right. It works.
Okay, so because I think that nobody heard you on the Facebook. But in any case, the when it comes to yeah, it was not by design. So when it comes to political progressivism, so I'm gonna sideswipe any type of official definition of what it is or why I think that it is what it is, and instead I'm going to say how it's acting today. Practically, what is a progressive today? How does a progressive act? So it could be that progressives aren't along the lines of, if you take out a textbook and look at what progressivism is, or what the thought leaders of progressive political thought say it should be, that's not going to be my question. I'm looking at this in a much more practical way. The way that progressives act today, but let's define who I'm talking about, not what I'm talking about. But let's say that you're talking about the Senator Bernie Sanders crowd, the Linda Sarsours, the Ilhan Omars, the Elizabeth Warrens, right, of the world. So that political spectrum, the non-establishment wing of the Democratic Party, who is very much trying to move the Democratic Party to the left. And I'm going to quote AOC here, because I think she said it best. And she said that if this was any other country, her and Joe Biden would never find themselves in the same party. Right? That's what practically what political progressivism is today, is AOC and not President Biden. Now, they're both Democrats, but that's only because in the American system as you have it today, they have to be on the same side, because a third party cannot succeed. It doesn't have the resources. It doesn't have the infrastructure. It can't. So by default,
right. It's the opposition party theory, that the Democrat Party is really the opposition party, and therefore it's made up of a conglomerate of different viewpoints that are not GOP. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, but you could say the same exact thing in a mirror view of the GOP, because you have Tea Party GOPs, you have Rand Paul GOPs, and then you have Marco Rubio.
Is Tea Party, isn't he?
I don't know. I think he's more libertarian than Tea Party. I don't think Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are going to sit in the same same chairs or same side of many different issues. I think there's a lot of issues they're going to disagree with. I think Rand Paul and his father really, as libertarians, really set themselves apart. So in any case, though, because we're going to just keep talking about this until we get to the
progressives.
Right, progressives. So I think that when I'm saying progressives, I'm not going to define what makes a progressive a progressive. I'm going to tell you that if you find yourself agreeing more with AOC and Ilhan Omar and Bernie Sanders and Linda Sarsour, then you, for all intents and purposes, and you don't feel that President Biden and Vice President Harris are going far enough on the things that you want to see, then you are today a political progressive. And now comes our question. Can the person that you defined as an Orthodox Jew find themselves? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with every single one of their positions. Like that's absurd. But can an Orthodox Jew sit there and say, I find myself in much more in agreement with AOC and Bernie Sanders than I do with President Biden, and for sure with former President Trump.
So are you looking through this through a very kind of myopic lens that when you say progressive and then you put in Ilhan Omar, then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't like Ilhan Omar. I can't possibly be like her. But 1 second, what if I'm for socialized healthcare and transgender bathrooms and the removal of boys and girls designations in Targets in California? I can disagree with her about her foreign policy. I can think that she's I can think all sorts of things about her moral stature, but I could still agree with her on fiscal matters or on certain social matters. So I think kind of putting her installing her as opposed to, let's say, AOC is a little bit of a push in terms of how to think about it, framing of the
fine. I'll grant you that. So let's take out Ilhan Omar. Let's take out Linda Sarsour, for that matter.
Right. Let's take out all the people. Let's talk about a view. What view?
No, I don't want to do that.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, I don't understand why it would be a question. I can't think of a view. In my understanding of Orthodox Judaism, I can't think of a political view which would be impossible for me. But then again, meaning in terms of my orthodoxy, right? Because I understand is not the right word. I exist in a system that has a separation between the church and the state. So I can have Shlomo the Jew, and I can have Shlomo the Orthodox Jew, and I can have Shlomo the American Jew, in fact. And they don't have the same opinions. Do they have to?
Well, the question is, how much do you feel, right? And I know that you're much more of a libertarian. You have a much more libertarian bent than I do in terms of politically. So my question is, I guess, how much would you allow, or how much would you insist that your orthodoxy defines your political thought, your Jewish
Zero.
orthodoxy? Zero, right? Exactly. So I think that makes you somewhat unique, and I think that most Orthodox Jews would say that my political thought must be confirmed, and I definitely feel this way, by my views on halacha and Judaism. So if
Your political
was,
views,
my
your political views are guided by halacha.
By halacha. So that doesn't mean that obviously I don't think that America should, or Israel for that matter, should be a theocracy that's defined by halacha. But it does mean that I don't think that I can advocate for something that I feel is forbidden by the Torah.
Okay, so here's what would scare me about that kind of worldview. If evangelical Christians or Mormons or anyone else, frankly, had that view in the United States of America, I would be unfree to practice my Judaism in America, because the Christian view is that since I do not accept Jesus Christ, I am damned, and therefore I can't. It's heretical the way that I worship, perhaps, to many, right, on a personal level. So the same ability that I have to keep Shabbos, I want to extend to them through gay marriage or any kind of stem cell research, abortion, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So I would say this. So the question is, do you feel that you can vote for a candidate that completely prohibits, which we know the Torah doesn't, completely prohibits all forms of abortion, right? So if you have a candidate that sits there and says that if it's in the time, right in the moment of labor, and the doctor says, listen, it's either going to be the mother or the baby, right? So Catholicism says it's the baby, and Judaism says it's the mother, and Judaism would demand at that point an abortion, right? So the question is, would you be able to then vote for a candidate that you knew would say that the baby's life should take precedence?
Okay, so you're going to hate me for saying this.
I promise I won't.
Okay, well, maybe you won't. Maybe you won't. And I don't mean to sound flippant, but I don't care. And the reason is, I'm not. No one that I know is planning on that being a part of their lives, or would it ever get to that? And therefore, that's not the driving issue for me. I understand where both sides of the abortion debate are coming from. Right. And I can steel man either side. I have a third opinion about what the issues of abortion are. But in terms of the candidate, could I go with the candidate who's pro-life or a candidate that's pro-choice? Absolutely. And the flip side of that would be that if you had, like you said before, a guy like Ron Paul, let's say, someone who is a very, very much a libertarian, but let's say he was a libertarian anti-Semite. Anti-Semitism for me is a bigger issue because that's a more real issue in my life, as are taxes, than perhaps abortion is. So it's personal, right? So even I can disagree with him and still vote for him. And then, I assign a political weight and a political value to what happens really in my life.
So I think the answer to our question for you is much simpler than for me, because you're looking at, and you say, can an Orthodox Jew be a political progressive? And you say for sure, because politics and my Judaism don't have to mix. They don't have to come together.
Right. They don't have to align.
What?
They don't have to align.
Right. They don't have to align. And when you go into the voting booth, you're not bringing your Shulchan Aruch inside.
Right.
Right. So I very much do. And I'm not convinced, by the way, that my system, my way is better than yours or more correct at all. And I don't know. And it gets very confusing in Israel, because as you know, I'm in Israel, and when I vote in Israel, so for many years, the way I voted was who is going to be the best party to increase Torah observance in Israel. And I felt that I had to vote that way, because if I wasn't voting that way, then I was betraying my allegiance to God and Torah.
Oh man, that's a good stick to beat people with.
Right, it is.
I like that.
And
that's
I'll tell you where,
if you don't vote for the religious party, you're a heretic. You are weakening God.
If you look at
God, that's Jewish Hezbollah.
Right, yes. No, so Shas, I'll tell you where it came from. And by the way,
Dairy. Aryeh Deri.
No, I'm not. That is Aryeh Deri. Aryeh Deri is who's the leader of the Shas party, which is the ultra-Orthodox Sephardi party. Aryeh Deri's campaign Shas's campaign is Bachar b'Hashem, choose God, choose Shas. That's their campaign policy.
Right.
It used to be much worse. It used to be you can only go to the world to come if you vote Shas. He's gotten a little.
Tone it down. Tone down the rhetoric. Tone down the rhetoric.
Yeah, but I'll tell you where it came
positively
from.
A moderate.
Right. So I'll tell you where it came from. Mine did not come from Aryeh Deri. I have no, I'm not going to give my opinion on Aryeh Deri, but I definitely am not a student of Aryeh Deri. But it came from my Rebbe from Rav Sinai, Harei Kaparas Mishkavo, who I would frequently ask him, because we have elections here frequently. So I would frequently ask him, how do you decide? I would never ask him, who should I vote for? He would tell me who I should vote for, but I would never tell. But I'd ask him how one should decide, and he very straight out told me. He said, you can't vote for a party that is when there's another party out there that's going to be better for Torah. And then he would tell me which party he felt was better for Torah. And now let me just finish. Let me finish the evolution of my thought here. So there was a party that I was convinced that I voted for years that was better for Torah, until I started realizing that they were violating the Torah in many other areas, that they were not. So in some very, very loud and clear ways, they were definitely advancing the Torah's agenda in Israel and making Torah observance much easier and Torah study much easier. But in many other areas, I found them violating massive prohibitions in the Torah that disgusted me. And then I said, I can no longer vote for this party because they're not advancing the Torah's agenda here. They're in fact doing the exact opposite. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Let me just finish one sentence. So it's not that my philosophy changed, that we should vote for the party that advances Torah.
Your opinion of them changed.
My opinion of that they're not that party.
Yeah, I understand. I think that there's a big assumption here, and that perhaps we don't question it. And the assumption is that the idea that there would be a religious party is somehow good for Torah. And that's unclear to me, because when do we find in Jewish history this sort of theme, this kind of idea? The rabbis, how should we put this? Torah will be just fine and possibly stronger than ever if the government would stay out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that have to be understood, such as army issues or kashrut issues, right? There, of course, there are issues in society whenever a society overlaps, right, with a civilian issue imperative and a religious imperative. But outside of that, why should the religious party have a say in the infrastructure and the garbage pickup and it doesn't, you get the point.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that at least the ultra-Orthodox parties, right, so meaning Shas and UTJ, so those two parties have no interest in those areas.
It's only about money.
Right. It's all about, well, I mean, it's about money for, let's finish the sentence because that's important. It's about money for their institutions, mostly educational institutions, right?
So how do you feel about that? How is that not despicable? And I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, and I would love for you to convince me, what I'm not seeing here. How does that not demean the honor of the Torah?
Well, that's the evolution of my thought. But let's get back to now. I'm bringing it back to progressivism now. So really, you see, I think it's almost. I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but I think it's almost unfair of you to engage in this conversation of whether an Orthodox Jew can be a progressive, because your answer is so clearly yes. It's not a question for you, not because you see. I think a lot of people would like the answer to this question to be, of course, an Orthodox Jew can be a progressive because progressivism and Orthodox Judaism have nothing contradictory. But that's not your answer. Your answer is it doesn't make a difference if they're contradictory because that's not how one defines their political thought.
That's what I thought you meant. When you said they're not contradictory, I'm like, right, they're not contradictory. But you're not saying that their values aren't contradictory. Of course there are contradictory values. Of
Okay.
course, there are contradicting parties, but you don't have to be. Again, you don't have to be a progressive by any stretch. Like you were talking about the certainly the leftern I said leftern the leftward fringe of the Democratic Party. To talk about things that don't agree with the Torah, you don't have to go that far to the left, right? So you're saying like how egregious are the disagreements? Like, oh my gosh, they're baking cakes for gay couples versus they're ceding land in the land of Israel that was promised to the Jewish people, or oh my gosh, they're allowed to drive on a Saturday. Where are you drawing that line?
Right. So it's fascinating because the truth is you could really ask the question. I mean, if you really want to upset people, and maybe I'll do this tomorrow, but the question could be, that seems to be what my theme is on my Facebook page as of late. But the question really could also be posed: can an Orthodox Jew be a political conservative?
Yeah, it's the same question, right?
Well, no, I know. So I don't think it's the same question. You do.
No, let me boil down your question. Can an Orthodox Jew have a political identity that does not align with the Torah values? And I don't understand how any political party can align with the Torah values.
So I think that when the reason why I asked the question originally was because I like to ask a question that plays on people's assumptions, especially the majority of the people that follow me on social media. So I see the I see the I try to say this. I see the majority of people that are following me assume that the progressive thought process of progressive political candidates today is anti-Torah. And therefore, right, that's the assumption. I'm not at all justifying it or commenting on it whatsoever. But that is the short assumption that if you're an Orthodox Jew today, you cannot be a progressive because of their advocacy for transgenderism, because of their advocacy for LGBTQ, not rights, but lifestyles, because of their advocacy for socialism, which for some reason people think has no place in the Torah. Right.
What does that have to do with the Torah? You could be very from socialists.
I'm throwing out there what people think, not what that I'm saying.
Absurd.
That is, if you took a poll and especially if the comments on my Facebook, that's what you would see. Okay. So that's what you'd see. So by asking the question, I'm challenging that assumption. But the same thing could be said about conservative, political thought. Right. There are plenty of things like the pro-life. Judaism is not if you take the definitions of pro-life and pro-choice from the American political spectrum, Judaism doesn't fall in any of them whatsoever because we allow certain abortions and we don't allow others, and we obligate certain abortions.
Right, exactly. Or things like stem cells, right? Using frozen embryos. The Torah would say that you're obligated to use them to try and find a cure for such and such disease. Whereas according to the Catholic Church, it would be tantamount to murder. It is an abortion by definition. Right? So there are a million and one examples. But again, the issue is the paradigm, not the particular.
Right. I think we only have a couple of minutes here, and I think that we're going to greatly disappoint people, and I think that's why a lot of people are checking out because. And I think what's so beautiful about the way that you and I, and we're disagreeing here completely. But I think what people wanted here was a barroom fight, and that was where it was, and I assume that most people felt that we would agree that progressivism is anti-Torah and anti-Judaism and anti-God.
Oh, oops! Sorry to disappoint.
So I'm saying I'm saying so, and I think that when people hear that and they don't hear the barroom antics of you can't be a Jew and think this way. I think that's great as well. But I think that's
if there's anyone who does feel that way and wants to show me the light, I'm happy to look.
Yeah. So you know what? So if anybody, I'm going to ask if anybody wants to talk. We've got like 1 or 2 minutes. If you want to raise your hand, is Svi someone related to you?
I don't know. I can't see.
His last name is Sprung.
Oh, then I would think Svi Sprung is my uncle. That's my Uncle Svi.
Okay, so I'm letting him talk.
Hey, Uncle Svi. I'm amazing. It's I'm gonna try to learn how to do that.
Someone I don't always have the same
too, are you including under your progressive umbrella Bernie's and AOC's willingness to throw Israel under the bus at the drop of a hat?
So see, that's very okay. So yeah, I see how you guys are related. But here's the so it's very interesting because one of the things that we didn't bring up, Uncle Tzvi, is Israel. We have been talking about social justice issues, and we have not talked about Israel at all. And I'm glad that you picked up on that because that's
and you see where they intersect, right? Like those lines intersect very starkly because the quote Palestinian narrative is of course that of the colonized and Europeanized apartheid regime. Right? They got the brunt of this colonial apartheid enterprise named the Israeli government. So it's the same intersectionality there. That's where it comes from.
And thirdfold, one, I don't think, certainly it doesn't work in Israel and it has no relevance here. Halacha does not function well under a democracy. It does not.
Halacha is a democracy.
It won't work in Israel. Halacha is not a democracy.
Right?
We define democracy.
No, it's not. It's a rabbi democracy. It's not a populist democracy.
Yes, but that's not how we look at democracy. Right. Democracy is everybody gets a vote, not just the rabbis. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't work well in Israel, and it certainly has no place in America. Why should I put my halakhic values under Joe Schmo industry in America?
I agree.
So that's my 2 cents.
Uri, he agrees with me.
Well, that was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and how? What would you respond to that? Of how come you're okay legislating your religious values on other people, but you're not okay with them doing the same to you?
Right, that's a very good question. Okay, well, that's all the time we have this week.
All right, but Pili, I love you, man. I can't wait for next week. We're gonna have so much fun.
Yeah, we have to. I think maybe we should even just continue this next week. I think this might be
whatever the people want to hear, brother. Whatever they want to hear.
Well, we'll never know, but okay. So, Rabbi Sprung, thank you very much for another wonderful show. Next week will be believe that there will be 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes, and we'll have more time to flesh out the issues. And have a very, very good week.
Peace and love. I'm amazing.